Anyway, before we get started and I call up General Alexander, I'd like to give thanks to Jerry Buckley from Buckley Sandler. He's really the one that helped facilitate having General Alexander come in here and speak today. I'm really, on a personal note, very excited for this session. I was talking to General Alexander earlier at lunch. I had a son who did a couple tours in Marja, Afghanistan, so this is near and dear to me. I'm very interested to hear what he has to say. So I'm going to go through a brief intro. I told General Alexander it was going to take about 20 minutes, but he said no, it's going to be about 2 sentences. So it's going to be very, very short. General Alexander, founder and CEO of IronNet Cybersecurity, is one of the foremost authorities on cybersecurity in the world. A 4-star general with the Army. He was previously the first commander and highest ranked military official of the U.S. Cyber Command and National Security Agency and Central Security Service, where he led these departments of defense agencies during the conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq when attempted cyber attacks against the U.S. began to increase. So without any further ado, General Alexander, if you could come up, that'd be great.
So I might start up here, but I'm almost tall enough to stand down there. Thank you. Thank you. That was 2 run-on sentences. I just want to be clear on that. You know, I thought what I would do is talk to you a little bit about NSA first to set the stage and give you some insights to things that went on when I first got to NSA and how the digital world changed in the 2005 to 2008 timeframe, because it impacted all of our operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. It'll give you some really good insights about what NSA really does versus what you read in the papers about them reading your emails, listening to your phone calls. Because while you're all very important people, in reality, they're not doing that. So, you know, feel free to communicate. That's humor. Oh, and I have a sense of humor, and so you can laugh with me, and sometimes at me, it's okay. I have 16 grandchildren. I'm used to it. In 2006, I went over to Iraq, probably my 15th visit by then, and Dave Petraeus, a good friend of mine, a classmate, was in Baghdad, was just going to take over running Iraq. And the casualties that we were taking were mounting significantly. And if you remember, this is 2006, and you see this almost doubling at a 6-month rate, the number of injuries and deaths that we have. And things weren't going good. So this would result in a surge and other things. I sat down with Dave and then with a number of the commanders and said, what form of intelligence is the best form? What's really helping you guys out here? Thinking they're going to say signals intelligence, and it was NSA. And they said human intelligence. I was just stunned. What do you mean human intelligence? I mean, we provide the most intelligence. You guys provide a lot of stuff. You're really good. It's normally late by the time we get it. So it's not actionable. It's not operational. It's not helpful. And I thought he was going to do this. You're a loser. I thought, whoa. And so I then walked around Baghdad and looked at all our sites and said, so what do we do with our information? How do we do it? And what do we need to do to change it? And I found out that the way we had always done business was to bring everything back to the U.S., process it up at Fort Meade, translate it, send the report, get it exactly right. These were perfect reports, no spelling errors, and get it back to combat operations 16 hours later. And that was considered good. We're less than a day. Of course, if you want to know, is the bad guy on the street corner, and that's all you need to know, by the time you get our message, he didn't stand there for 16 hours. We actually checked that. And so that was a joke. And I'll work, you know, when I was a general, I used to get people to laugh all the time at my jokes. It's amazing, and give me putts. They said, you're really hilarious. Not. And So what we did is we created a system very quickly and said, we've got to fix this. If we're the digital, the signals folks, you know, these are us, our people. And we went from having 28 people in Iraq to my time there, we deployed 6,000 to Iraq and Afghanistan. And what we did is said, we need to rewire Iraq in our way so that we can help our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines live through this. And Dave Petraeus' book, if you look at it, it'll talk about what we did in there. In the year from the time we deployed the system in the January 2007, that year we helped take down 3,950 bad guys. It changed the way we operated in Iraq. It changed the story, and you know, some of the best discussions. So Stan McChrystal, good friend of mine, you want people who can really shoot good to be your friends, especially in a combat zone, especially when they have Delta, SEAL Team 6, and others in their rucksack. Good things. Just a hint if you go over there. And you know, I was trying to convince him he needed to share his information. He says, oh, we can't share it. And so I said, well, tell me who your top 10 bad guys are. And so he gave it to us, and we put them into our system. He said, do you want to know where they are right now? We turned the system around and said, there they are. 15 minutes later, we were best partners with JSOC. We had 60 people in their SOC. And that's what I believe our nation meant when we said we had to have intel integrated with combat operations. It's about taking care of our military and civilian that are abroad. And I bring that story up because when you look at it, one, these were people that I knew, people that our nation is sending over to put in harm's way, and it's our nation's responsibility to bring them back. Thank you, thank you. It's my older brother, or younger brother, I'm sorry, and actually to bring them back. And we're gonna go through a few of these, and we're gonna talk about civil liberties and privacy. We're gonna talk about Snowden. Well, maybe it won't do that. We'll talk about, I'll tell you what I really feel. I want to talk about what does this mean for you in digital records and where are we going? Because it was, you know, it was the most fascinating time to be at NSA. And, you know, when I looked at what's this data, how are we collecting data, what's going on, I found out I get to NSA on Friday afternoon, they cancel the major collection system. Monday morning, I sign in. I'm now in charge. And I said, so you just canceled our major collection system. We're a collection agency. Does that impact our operations? And I'm just thinking out loud here. And Secretary Rumsfeld said, well, no, your job is to figure out where to go. And it was an amazing time with amazing people who did great things for this country. And it also highlighted the issues that you face today, which was we're going from an analog world in communications in 2005 and 6 and 7 to a digital communications globally. And in doing that, remember in 2007, the first iPhone came out. 2007, less than 10 years ago. And this whole field changed. Changed for you, changed for our intel community, changed for the world. And let me just hit a little bit on technology because I think it's important for you to think about what that means when you start talking about e-records, e-signatures, and all the things that you're working on. And there's a great video you can get on YouTube, and it's called Did You Know 2016. It's worth the 6 minutes or a little bit less than it runs, and it tells you the changes that are going on right now and what that means. And some of those include this. It talks about the amount of unique information that will be created this year. Zettabytes. Last year it was 8 zettabytes, I think is what they used. That's 8 with 21 zeros after it. Now, we can't comprehend how much data that is, but here to put it in a concise form, that's more than the last 5,000 years combined. 1 year. And next year, they'll do it in less than a year. And the year after that, less than that. So it's doubling every year. These devices, Fitbits, watches, your smart refrigerator, all these devices are communicating. Data's coming in. Benny. Oh, that's a different thing. I know you had your New Jersey lesson, so it's all good, though, in this case. And what you have happening in this field, technology doubling every 2 years. For those of you who have kids in college, that means what they learn in their freshman year, half of that's outdated by their junior year. And the top 10 in-demand jobs this year didn't exist 10 years ago. iPhones, Android app writers, clouds, all these things. It's changing. And think about your world. E-signatures, what's going on? Multi-factor authentication, ubiquitous encryption. All of that is new. It's changing. It's advancing at rates that we've never seen before. And it's going to continue to grow faster, better, and more vulnerabilities, more problems for criminal, for insiders, for nation states. And those changes are really what you're trying to ensure don't happen with the things that you do. Because you want your signatures and your other forms of authentication to be from a specific person. You want to understand that, you want to have that exactly right. So, tremendous opportunities, and I was asked by, this is serious questions. You got to have a sense of humor as a military officer. I found out sense of humor's help, gets you through the day. It's kind of like coffee. Coffee and a sense of humor. Sometimes you didn't get the coffee, and as a joke. And we always got coffee. Come on, it's the military. And when you look at all the things that are going on in the military, what we have, where we are, and what you see going on, I would be asked by members of Congress, shouldn't we outlaw the internet? And I raised my eyebrows a little bit, and I thought, how do you answer a really stupid question and act like you're respectful, think it's a brilliant question, and try to say, you probably should never say that in public? But I was asked that. I was really asked that question. Shouldn't we outlaw the internet? And people say, well, isn't this a dangerous course that we're on? And you look at Jeopardy, Watson, right? Some of you have seen Watson play Jeopardy, a machine against humans, beat the best humans in the world, really just destroyed them. It was amazing. Machines are getting better. In fact, there's this discussion on that YouTube video that by the year 2049, while it's hard to predict, they predict this out, that one computer will have more computational capacity than the entire human race. One. Think about that. I think about Terminator. No, I'm just kidding. What are the good things that you can use that for? So, talking to John Kelly and the folks from IBM, what you quickly learn is that was great to beat people in Jeopardy. We don't normally have that as a core competency in business. You don't have a business. My team is the best Jeopardy team. Kind of hard. So what they did is they looked at cancer. And if you're diagnosed with a lethal form of brain cancer, you're normally given 14 months to live, plus or minus 2, in part because coming up with the right chemotherapy and radiation regimen takes 5 doctors, 30 days to come up with that. And the cancer metastasizes faster than we combat it. 30 days. And if you think about what we were doing in Iraq, what they took Watson to do is they took that 30 days at the Human Genome Center in New York City to 9 minutes. To 9 minutes. And when you think about the iPads and other portable devices, we can now look at the human genome, your DNA, and for about $100, we can code it and we can tell you your chances of getting various degrees. Well, I can't, but somebody can. They have these things out there, right? And it's coming. We will solve cancer, ALS, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS over the next couple decades because of the information we're getting. So we can't slow down. We shouldn't slow down. We have to move forward. just like you're moving forward in this industry, because it makes economic sense to allow people to do this with mobile devices and do it securely. But the adversaries see that, and now we have this problem. So I'm going to talk about the problem for a little bit. And I'm going to weave in a couple of stories as we go through. The first one, you know, in 2007, you saw the attack against Estonia by Russian hackers. I put the quotes around. I actually put it around because my daughter, when she said, my youngest daughter, I have 4 daughters, the youngest one, when she wanted to say a dirty word to make it okay, she put quotes around it. And you know, my comment was, you know, that's still a dirty word. Yeah, but I'm using this. That's okay, right? No. But I guess, so you learn things. She has some great jokes. I wonder where she learned them and if they use quotes. I'll have to ask her that. In 2007, these Russian hackers, think of FSB agents, actually hit Estonia over the Estonians tipping over the Stalin monument in Tallinn. Huge attack to a nation of 1.4 million people. They'd fit in less than a borough in New York, and they'd be at one of the exits, probably exit 45 in Jersey. And 1.4 million people, they got hammered. Knocked them off the internet. They vote online, they bank online. They're one of the most integrated digital societies, and this was a change for them. I actually got to meet with President Ilves several times, and they are doing everything they can to protect it. 2008, Russian forces attack into Georgia. And again, hackers, uniquely timed to that attack, attacked Georgian banks and government. In August of 2008, and then October of 2008, we found some, NSA found some information, sensitive Defense Department information in a foreign network where it shouldn't have been. And at that time, you'll see the irony, NSA was not authorized to go into the DoD networks. We had to be invited in. It's ironic, right? So we go down, we knocked on the door. We think you have a problem. They open the door. These aren't the droids you're looking for. Click. And so we tried to explain to them. Our guys spent probably the better part of the next week and a half. So they finally said, okay, come in. We can't see anything. Our guys on Friday afternoon, 16:30, 24 October, all bad things in government happen on a Friday afternoon to screw up your weekend. Same thing in business. I know that. I'm finding out same thing in business. And these 6 guys, it would have been 5 guys, but they didn't have a Hamburg with them, so it was 6. Joe, sorry, I'll go slower. And they knock on the door and they say, sir, we've got a problem. I know, it's Friday afternoon. And so they say, we found 1,500 pieces of malicious software on the DoD classified network. I thought, that can't be good. And they said, that's why you're the director. You picked right up on that. We're proud to serve with you. You're just really got your hands on the throttle here. And so I turned around, I called Secretary Gates, and I called Chairman Mullen and explained it to him. And then I turned around to this group and said, okay, we found the problem. We need to solve it. And so, you know, the nice part about being a general officer, your job is to come up with a timeline. How hard can this be? Nothing's too hard for those of us who don't need to do it, was one of my favorite statements. And so we came up with a system. I'm more of a tech guy, so we walked through how we're going to build this system, what we're going to do, how the encryption and everything's going to go into it, yada, yada, yada. We get it all set. And so then I said, well, how long do you think this will take? It's Friday, now it's about Friday, 1800. Do you think we can have that ready by mid-afternoon tomorrow up on the network? What do you think, guys, huh? Everybody for it? No enthusiasm, huh? Okay, well, let's do it anyhow. So next day, 14:30, this is up and running on the DoD network. It solved the problem. Nobody else in the world could have done it. Monday morning, the services come in, and those who don't understand what the hack was, the first thing that they want to do is count the number of systems. And so I, calmly just explained, nobody came in and physically took anything. They hacked your system, and here's how we solved it. Well, we're going to count all our systems. Think about this, military people counting to 7 million. I thought about that, and I thought about my ability to count to 7 million and remember and do it every day. And then add it up. And then with machines coming in and machines going out, it's never going to be the same. It would be a huge problem. I think that's what we call it, a huge problem. We use cluster, but we'll use problem here. And so we said, this ain't going to work. You guys can go count all day long. I told the secretary, okay, we solved that problem. We got other things we're going to go on to. And here's one of the things that we went on to, just to give you an idea. So this is going on. NSA is one of the problems that we're dealing with in that time period is a hostage, Jessica Buchanan. So Jessica Buchanan, a few months earlier, had been taken hostage by Somali pirates. And one of the things that NSA did was track all hostages. So if you ever taken hostage someplace, NSA is going to track you as best they can. And we had learned through some of the sources in the intel community that she was sick and would probably die in captivity if they didn't get her out fairly quickly. So State Department came to the Defense Department, said, you need to mount hostage rescue. And Defense Department passed that off to Joint Special Ops Command, now commanded by Joe Votel. And Joe came to me and said, we need to find her. Do you know where she is? NSA finds her. And what a privilege and honor it is to work with folks like Joint Special Ops Command. And we have this room at NSA that we built called the Battle Command Center. And you see these Clancy models and movies and stuff where they have all these screens and they have all that. Real world is much better. It's really neat, really is. It was great. So think about what your nation does to help one person, rescue one person, moving intelligence agencies, assets, and special ops into the field to go into Somalia through hostile territory with all the intelligence support these guys should have and did have, go in there, take down these 9 pirates. One of them made the bad mistake of raising a weapon. He and his 8 comrades all died in about 3 seconds. Don't raise weapons to JSOC. I have that sticky on my door, refrigerator door. It's a smart refrigerator because of the sticky. And it's amazing. They got her back. And so all that's going on. This is October timeframe 2008. And now if you circle back to the cyber stuff, I got along great with Secretary Gates. I think that was perhaps one of my problems. And he asked me my opinion on a few things. I said that. He said, scare me in cyber, and I did. He said, okay, that's good. Don't scare me ever again. And I gave him some of the worst case scenarios. And he said, I thought I would be retiring in the summer of 2008, as we talked about, because that would have been my 3-year point as the director of NSA, and I'd already served 2 years in another 3-star job. And so they extended me because my father-in-law said, because you can't get a job on the outside, you're on the public dole, and when are you going to get a real job? And he decided, that's when he decided, let's build Cyber Command. And the way it went about was I was in charge of all the offense and the intel. And on November 11th, about 3 weeks later, he calls me up and he says, you were in charge of the offense? Well, you're now in charge of the defense too. Congratulations. That's when I learned in the Defense Department and government, no good deed goes unpunished. And so they gave me this big bag of defend the government networks, the DoD networks. And when I asked the guys, how do you defend this? And what happened? How did this get in? It sounded like, some of these airplane things, where you have a guy explain, how it went like this, and in the Johnny Depp talk, and nobody could explain it. And I said, well, do we know how they got in? Not yet. Why? Well, the way the network's set up, the way it's partitioned, we can't see the network. We can't see it. and the threat. So we're fighting blind. Imagine they turn this room completely dark, take everybody out and say, find your chair. And now they have one group that has night vision goggles. We'll call them the threat guys. They can watch everybody stumbling around, tripping over chairs, while you're trying to find your chair to protect your table. The offense has the night vision goggles. The defense is trying to defend tables that they can't see. That won't work. That doesn't work. Advantage to the offense. And so we come up with 5 different things that we need to do and where we need to go. And it was kind of amazing because in the military, you know, they say, well, if you ask for forces, be careful how many you ask for because they won't give it to you, and they give me them. So I think, well, I'm now a 4-star. What the hell, I'll just ask for what I need. That's a novel approach used by few. And they said, what do you need? I need 6,000 people. The services looked at me, 6,000? That's like with 3 zeros, 6 with 3 zeros? I said, it could have been zettabytes, but that would be more than you have. So we'll just, 6,000. So I explained, you need these offensive teams, you need these analytic teams, you need these protection teams. And I'll tell you, I just talked to some of the folks. Those teams now are all stood up and running at Cyber Command today. We'll come back to that in a minute. So that's 2010 to 11. 12, what happens in 2012? Saudi Aramco. And with Saudi Aramco, what you have going on there is not just disruptive attacks, but destructive attacks. And these destructive attacks destroys the data on over 30,000 systems. Launched by Iran, and what we then saw was over 350 distributed denial of service attacks against Wall Street, the financial sector, from 2012 to March, April timeframe of 2013, and 2 destructive attacks against South Korea by North Korea, against their banks and their financial sector. And the reason I kind of extend that out, and then you can add in all the other hacks that you've now seen, including Sony, OPM, Target, JP Morgan, etc. Everybody's getting hacked. Our strategy's not working, and there are some serious problems. So 2013, I think the reason the attacks went is because Snowden pops up. You want to know something interesting? Where was I on the morning that we first heard that 5 June? Berlin, Germany. Yep, I was meeting with our German counterparts. Little did I know how that would play out. And so then we have the Snowden things coming in, the summer of 2013. And I think it's important just to give you some insights on civil liberties and privacy and then kind of end up on the path forward in cyberspace. So in 2013, was this the vodka that you'd promised? Yeah. Okay. Because Snowden was in Russia and I thought it's appropriate that I drink vodka. You notice how I got that to stay on? That was a talent. Okay. So in August of 2013, I get this call from the White House. Just to back up a little bit. As the NSA director, I was a 3-star Army officer who used to talk to the chief of staff of the Army, was the big guy I talked to. I get up to NSA, and 2 weeks into that, they say, my first 2 days on the job, they said, you're going to brief the president in 2 weeks. I said, great, what's the topic? You're not cleared for the topic. It's going to be a short briefing. And I said, so what do I need to be cleared? And they said, well, the vice president's got to clear you for it. And I said, so I'm briefing on a topic I'm not cleared for. The vice president's got to do that, and I got it in 2 weeks. Shouldn't be a problem. I ended up going to the White House probably 2 to 4 times a month, about every week, for the NSC. So you spend a lot of time at the White House. That's something that I never realized was in my to-do list as the NSA director, but you actually do, because NSA creates or collects 70% of our nation's intel. So down to the White House I would go. I get this call in the summer of 2013. We're going to have a meeting with the NSC staff. We're going to talk. We need you to come down. Okay. And I knew it was going to be on a presidential review group on these 2 programs. And so I have these great ideas. We can get Colin Powell, we can get Condoleezza Rice, we can get all these luminaries to sit on this panel and tell the American people what we're doing and why we're doing it. So I go down there, and they're sitting on the one side of the big table. Thought, that's kind of antisocial. I took a shower. Might not have been this week, but I took a shower. And so I sit down and we start talking and say, well, we're going to have a presidential review group. I say, I know, I got some great ideas. How about well, we've already made the decision. I said, but I have some great ideas. I really do. Condoleezza Rice, Colin Powell. And they said, well, the president has already decided. You know it's not good news when they use their fingertips to press the files across the table and then pull their hand back before you can grab it. I think they thought I was postal. Not just an Army officer. And so I get these files, I open up the first one, and here's what I said. I'm not proud of this. So I read, yada, 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 board member of the American Civil Liberties Union. And I said, you've got to be shitting me. These guys, I actually said that, and I know I shouldn't have. I'm sorry. This guy's suing us, and you're going to have him come and look at our programs. And they said, the president has made that decision. Okay, I'm a good soldier. I'll salute. We'll do the best job we can. So we go up to NSA, and the next day, the Presidential Review Group, new team comes up to NSA. And the guy from the ACLU is sitting about where you're sitting with speaker and all the other awards and decorations. And yeah, and so he's sitting there like this. You know, body language means about, and he's looking at me like, Luke, I ate your father. You know, Darth Vader. I have a grandson who thinks Darth Vader is the greatest thing in the world. And I looked at him somewhat askance, and I thought, well, our job is to tell them about these programs. And to use the seniors to do it this morning, I walked them through it. I had some of our seniors, and I said, but you don't want to hear from us. You want to hear the people that run this. So the young folks that run these programs over the next 5 weeks will be here every day that you're here and do a 100% audit on both programs and answer any questions and every question that you have. And they did that over the next 5 weeks. And we have great young people up there. And I come back in 5 weeks later, and the guy's sitting in the same place, but he's no longer got his arms crossed. He's sitting like this. I come in, he jumps up, and I think, uh-oh, he's going to attack. You know, so I'm in pretty good shape. I think I can take him. My protection unit's not here, but I think I got him. So he comes walking around. I meet him halfway. You know, it's like no lightsabers. And he grabs my hand and starts shaking. You know those guys that shake your hand and your whole body moves like this? And you think, wow. And he goes, you and your people have the greatest integrity of any agency in government. I was stunned. I was going to say, what'd you do with the ACLU, dude? I said, well, don't tell me. Tell the White House, tell Congress, tell the American people, and tell the people of NSA. And he said, I'll do that. So I'm going to read you this because I think it's important for where we go in the future. He said, to say I was skeptical of the NSA is in truth an understatement. I came away from my work on the review group with a view of NSA that I found quite surprising. Not only did I find that the NSA had helped to thwart numerous terrorist plots since 9/11, but I also found terrorist plots against the United States and its allies in the years since 9/11, but I also found that it is an organization that operates with a high degree of integrity and a deep commitment to the rule of law. Signed, Jeffrey Stone, Presidential Review Group member, board member of the ACLU, and he was the acting dean at the University of Chicago Law School, and one of the guys who actually taught President Obama. And it turned out to be a good choice to have him on that committee, because if we, in having him look at these programs, he would say, he went to the president and said, these are great people. I think the president was stunned. And then about a year and a half later, these programs were coming up for review. He gives me a call and he says, we need to write an op-ed. I said, well, what's the op-ed going to say? What are we doing? He said, well, we need these programs to be reauthorized. I said, but you're not for those programs. You wanted to change this or this. And he goes, well, I don't like this program, but here's the facts. If our law enforcement intelligence agencies don't have the tools they need to protect this nation, the next time we're attacked, we won't have civil liberties and privacy. So I'm for it. He and I wrote an op-ed jointly. Imagine if an Army officer and a board member of the ACLU, you can't get much further apart, maybe a little bit further than this, can come together and do this. And I asked him, why are you doing it? And he said, it's the right thing for our nation, which is where I stood. What's the right thing for our country, and how do we do this? You know, as I look at now the political issues that we're facing, that's what our country needs, is people that will work together for the good of this nation without thinking about their own biases. But how do we do this right? And, you know, it now gets us to the rest of the story on cybersecurity. Because if you think about where we are in cybersecurity, we have industry, especially on the West Coast, that doesn't want to work with government. But the government's not here for the government. I dusted off this document. Actually, I don't have a document. I got it online, called the Constitution. And I thought, well, let's read what the preamble says. We the people. And then it goes on. For the common defense. And if you look at what our nation's forefathers put together to create our government, our Congress, the courts, and the states, it was built on working together for the common defense, for our future, and for domestic tranquility. And when you think about that, we need to get back to our roots on some of this, and in cyber, it's vital that we do that. Because government can't defend industry without partnership, and industry can't defend themselves without government. And when you look at what's going on, the practical reality is we are going to be attacked. We will be tested in cyberspace. It's coming. It's just a matter of time. So, what do we need to do? If you think about the financial sector as a complete sector, we need that sector to be able to create a surface where they all work together and information about who's probing them is shared at network speed. A tall order, but technically doable. And when an external entity is trying to break in, they need to be able to tell the right folks in government, whether it's FBI for law enforcement or Cyber Command and NSA for a national security threat, help. And let me play that out in another way. Let's look at Sony as a case. Who should have defended Sony? And we can argue, how many people think that Sony should have defended Sony? Raise your hands. How many think the government should have defended Sony? How many think that the government and Sony should have worked together to defend Sony? Yeah, most everybody. Well, they don't. So we got to fix that. And you know, you're asked these questions. Should Sony be allowed to attack back? Now, quite candidly, I believe if Sony had the right tools, they could have kicked NK's butt, North Korea's butt. But here's the problem. Let's say they go in to North Korea with their offensive tools, new, and they say, we're going to get you guys, and they take out all these things. And that Don King lookalike there, who's the president of North Korea, says, whoa, that's not going to happen. And he launches a physical attack on South Korea. And it escalates. We just had a company doing what's inherently governmental and started a land war on the Korean Peninsula. So we can't have North Korea do it, or we can't have Sony attack them. That's a government job. But the government can't see it. So the solution is government and industry have to work together if we're going to solve this problem. And it has to be at speeds that would allow the government to help protect it. And it doesn't include personally identifiable information or intellectual property. It's all about threats and what's going on. I bring that up because speed is of the essence, and in the industry that you deal in, it's all about speed. Electronic signatures and everything that you're doing in the records area is about speed, efficiency, going paperless, and going to where we are. So where do I think this will go? I believe we're going to see increased regulation, and especially in the financial sector and probably for you, on some of these areas until we meet certain standards. I'm not for regulations. I'm for actually just coming up with these standards as a body and figuring out how to do it. But I see those coming up with the NIST framework, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the framework that they use for cybersecurity, or the international standards, 27001, and others being the standards that you all in the financial sector, energy sector, retail sector are going to have to meet. But that doesn't solve the problem that we just talked about. That just sets a base case. We need a way for these to communicate together, to work together. And I'll give you a case in point, and I'll use the JP Morgan hack as a way of talking about that. I'm still keeping it on. I know it's connected now. When JP Morgan was actually hacked, what happened is this adversary scanned 7 or 8 banks. And this bank was okay, they were just looking for places to get in. Oop, found a crack. Somebody hadn't done a patch or failed to do something exactly right at JP Morgan. Into JP Morgan, the other 6 were okay. Now, the information on the other 6 went into their firewall logs. And JP Morgan was discovered, 4 weeks later after all the damage was done. And then the investigation finds out that, yep, you were tested, test was on your logs, but no human looked at that because there's so much data. Now change that around. Imagine that those 7 banks and all the rest said, I'm being probed by an adversary. Most of your clients for banks don't scan 8 banks to see if any of them are ready for business. And you can look at and determine who those are. We should do that. And if we were able to do that at network speed, to say, hey, you're all being scanned by the same person, and oh, by the way, JP Morgan, sorry, you've been hacked, or you're in there, that would have solved it in a minute. That's the types of technology and changes we need to make. And that's where our nation needs to go. And I think the reason I use this thing with Jeffrey Stone on civil liberties and privacy is, you can look it up. He doesn't agree with some of the things at NSA, and he and I could argue on that. But it's interesting, look at the op-ed that he and I wrote. And some of his statements were, he was really impressed with the people that we had at NSA and the way they conducted their business. And what that tells me is that we can protect civil liberties and privacy and defend this country. We can do both. We should do both. And that's where we need to get that word out and have that understood. Because the vast majority of people think, no, they're listening to my emails, they're reading, or if they're listening to your emails, they're not getting a lot. But if they're listening to your phone calls and reading your emails, think about that. Somebody asked me, how many people would NSA have to do that if we did that just for the US, with 300 million people? And the answer is, you're going to need more than 1 million people to do that. NSA is not quite that big. We're just shy of 1 million. Okay, that's not true. So when you think about it, there's no reason to do it, and it would be illegal. Everything that they do has to follow these court things. So we've got to help get this back on track and secure our country. Because you all, who are on the front lines of adopting some of these e-records and other things that we're doing, need those capabilities. So with that, what I'm going to do is open it up for questions. Remember, I'm a former Army officer, so really easy, basic questions are appreciated. Any questions? Okay, I'm out of here. Jerry.
So not to put you on the spot, but first, what action items are necessary to get to where you want to be on sharing, and I think we all would like to be, on sharing and protecting the system, sharing information among institutions and with government? And are there any legislative changes that have to be made to bring that about?
So the legislation has already been passed that provides for the opportunity for government and industry to work together. Part of it is changing some of the rhetoric about, I can't work with government. And this, Apple, Google, all these got hit big from the Snowden things. And we didn't handle the Snowden stuff as well as we could have on the governmental level, explaining here's what we're doing, here's why we're doing. I think we should get a do-over. And I think that would start at the White House all the way through Congress, instead of just saying, oh, let's see how this comes out on the investigation, to here's where we need to be. So we've got to figure out how to bring Silicon Valley and government back together and industry and government back together. And actually, the easier of those two is industry, the financial sector, because that's most at risk. The financial sector spends the most money and would benefit greatest by this improvement. So to do that, we have to do a couple things. So this is one of the things that I'm working in my company, and that is we have to have companies that will work together and peer at network speed on attacks and events that they're seeing, not just by passing, as we do in the FS-ISAC, the Financial Services ISAC, Information Security Advisory Committee, but actually peer at network speed the fact that JP Morgan is being probed. Those kind of things should go on at network speed, and we should practice that. And we should practice that information peering within the financial sector, and when it's appropriate, to the government to say, hey, I've got Russian criminals or these guys coming from this place trying to do us harm, over to you. And the government should practice that and tell industry and the nation how they're going to do it, how they're going to defend us. And then we should take that to our allies and say, here's what we propose as a defensive cybersecurity architecture for our nation, and would like to extend that to our allies where appropriate. I think we can and should do all of that. It's not a technology. It's all about emotions, in my opinion. And we have the authority to do that, and we should go do it. We've also got to get the government set right. There was a great story here. I'll give it to you. The nice part about being there. So Leon Panetta, who was the director of CIA when I was there were 6 different directors of CIA when I was at NSA. That's how long I was there. And Panetta was one of those, and he becomes the Secretary of Defense. Now he's my boss. And I go to the Defense Department, and they say, I say, here's what I think my job is to defend the nation. Say, General, your job is to defend the DoD networks. I said, I don't agree with that. And they said, General, we don't care. This is your mission. That's not your mission. So I went to Panetta, and I said, I'm going to tell you a story. And the story is we've got missiles coming in to Denver, and we're tracking them, and we note those missiles aren't going to hit a military installation. We say, let them go. Not going to hurt DoD. We got DoD's back, but the rest of you. Now let's put it in cyberspace. We see all these attacks going against Wall Street, and we say, let them go. We don't have any money. We're good. That's a true statement. And so, just kidding. I said, so here's what happens the next day. We're going to be up in Congress, and they're going to say, what happened? And I'm going to say, well, here's what I was told. They said my mission was to protect DoD. I saw those attacks coming on Wall Street, said no DoD assets there, let it go. Over to you, Secretary. Explain it to them. And the answer is, and that's why I got the Constitution out this weekend, was the government was created to defend us, not to defend the government. We created it for the common defense. And it applies today. And so we've got to help make that happen. And DHS is responsible for incident response. So that's cleanup on aisle 9 after something goes bad. It's not to fight our nation's wars, that's DOD. And the FBI is there for criminal investigations. So when they find out the guy going after JP Morgan is a criminal, he's in Florida, whack, we get him, pass that to the FBI. That's the way we should do it. We actually created, with Secretary Napolitano, Director Bob Mueller and I, a bubble chart that explained those and took that to Gates and others. And that's part of the federal roles and responsibility in cyberspace. DOD's mission is to defend the nation. That gets lost in the rhetoric. And it's not practiced, and it's not rehearsed, and it should be. So that's where I think. Other questions? Jeffrey Stone.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for taking the time to come talk to us today. It's very informative, and I think it's very helpful to hear from you. Secondly, thank you for your service to the country.
Thanks.
I'm sure it was. You mentioned some of the national standards that you like to see in place. Could you clarify, are you looking for a national standard across the board, or will it be customized by industry for cybersecurity?
Yeah, that's a great
Difference.
point. And I waved over it, so I apologize for that. You know, after you've done this for so many years, you kind of jump things. But I see a standard for the following reasons. I believe that those companies that meet a standard, this is Alexander speaking, that let's say you meet the standard for this sector, for the financial sector you meet one standard, and others might be a little bit, so OT, your operational or ICS standards for energy might be slightly different. But for the financial sector, we want a set of standards, and then we want to measure and say, you meet that standard, and you can talk to the government. You've met two of the conditions that we would to give you liability. And with that liability protection, what that would mean is if you're attacked, you're free from liability if you met the standard and you informed the government on the attack, and we did everything we could do to stop it. And so what you want to do is you want to get us all to a standard that says, I'm meeting that. I wore my seatbelt. I did these things. I met this. There's so many frivolous lawsuits that go on about an attack that companies are dealing with. That's crazy. So let's come up with a standard that says, I meet the standard. I can check this off. I don't, don't make it like buying a house where you have this much paperwork. It's worse, I know. But don't make it so over-regulated that it's impossible to tell that you meet the standard, but show that you meet a standard and that you can quickly inform the government for protection and that we do the right things. Here's why I say that. My experience on the operational offensive side, we were 100% successful. The offense always wins. So if a nation state's coming after your bank, no matter how good you are, you got a problem. And what you need is it'd be like if a Russian regiment were attacking your bank, and everybody's looking, man, I'm glad I don't live in Jersey. They're going to take that bank down. Get off exit 1 and go down to the beach, Benny. And I know you learned all that today. And the shore. Yeah, I'm from upstate New York. We didn't even know there was a beach in Jersey. We just thought it was concrete from end to end. And so if you think about all that's going on there, we got to fix this. We have to go after it. And we haven't. So stop the frivolous lawsuits, get to a standard, and if a nation state's coming after you, have the government step in. That's what we've asked it to do as a common defense. Now, I'm not talking about creating a huge bureaucracy in the government. I'm talking about government and industry working together. Think about how our air defense picture is over the United States. Imagine that every radar was a radar for itself, and that the radar operator for that radar would pass information to other radars with email and tell them, I've got United Flight 560 coming on a track of about 270 at 35,000 feet. Sends an email, clicks it off to the 5 other radars that are next in line, and they get it a few minutes later. They open it up and they go, which one is that one? Can you imagine if we did our air picture like that? But that's how we do our cyber picture, and cyber goes faster. So we need real-time or network speed there. And we ought to practice that. And I get a lot of people say, we can't do that, we can't do that. One of the nice parts about being at NSA, we used to have this place. All of you who say we can't do it, move over there. All of you who think we can't, come on, let's go do it. We'll do it. We're the nation that developed the internet. We ought to be the first to protect it. Other questions? Oh, part way to you.
With the desire to have the benefits of the collaboration between industry and government, how do you avoid that collaboration ending up in a bureaucracy that actually slows down the information sharing?
We have to set standards there too. The people who are held accountable for defending the nation have their own set of standards to defend the nation. It's pretty straightforward. And in this space, that's a new area for us. But you can tell by the fact that if we rewound Sony and we had put what I said in place and we see North Korean attack, we should have been able to shut down gateways and other things that were providing that attack to come through and protected Sony. And gone over to North Korea and say, you really want to do this? And I think that's where our government can and should be. You know, when you think about, we're protected by 2 oceans, and attacking us is really difficult unless you use terrorism or cyber. So we ought to be good at countering terrorism, we are, and countering cyber threats, we're not. We need to get there. Please. He's bringing it to you. Portable mic.
Forget you.
Right. General, I was just going to ask, the concept that you've been describing kind of brings up the paradigm that we've been talking a lot about here. The whole idea of a network and a company's network, or JP Morgan's network being tested, et cetera, is beginning to break down with the Internet of Things. There is no such thing anymore as the single network, which is now protected against attack. It's happening from 1,000 different devices that are attached that weren't traditionally considered part of the network, just as the attackers are no longer just a particular identifiable entity or group or hacker. It can be coming from devices that have no obvious connection to somebody else. In that world where industry is creating, millions of new devices each week to meet consumer and other business demands, how does cybersecurity, especially if the government is involved, ever keep up?
So the Dine attack that happened a week ago Friday, highlighted what you just said by leveraging the Mirai tool set and botnet and going after using both the Internet of Things and the Internet to attack and shut down a whole series of services that Friday morning. And, what if that was a test or a demonstration? Now, most likely it was criminal activity, but what if it was a test and somebody was seeing, what could I do to this country with a huge distributed denial of service attack? Instead of 620 gigabytes, let's go to 4 terabytes and hit both the East Coast and West Coast. What happens to your communications infrastructure? And what if we did that timed with another country taking over maybe Eastern Ukraine? And so we got to get really good at that. And you highlight the fact that, well, we always thought that the Internet of Things was out there. Don't worry about it. It's like, your toasters and all these things. And now all of a sudden, they're all connecting to the Internet. So we got a problem we got to go solve. And it's not only standards, but how they're secured, how you do things on that, and how you provide traffic for the Internet of Things and OT traffic with IT, with your internet traffic, with your operational traffic, and is there ways to distinguish those and keep those separate? And right now, if you look at your iPhone, I'll bet you half the people in this room can Google either their Sonos device or they can Google their cameras in their house, right? And for those of you who have a smart TV, order some food. Okay, mine won't do that either. But you can see that they're all connecting to the internet. And that creates a problem. So the defensive architecture that we create has to solve that. And that's solvable. I believe that's eminently doable. And, it's one of the things in looking at where we're going is these are great opportunities. We have to solve those security issues that go with it before they become so hard that we have to almost stop to get things right. And so you all, that's my southern part, okay, just south, I was on the south side of Syracuse. I think that's from the south. And you all have the ability to help push some of this from where you are as an industry. Because you're going to need the government to help defend parts of your network. You want them to practice that. You want them to be trained, and you want to know how they're going to do that if somebody were trying to shut down your ability to do the job that you're paid for. How much revenue would be lost if we took down or stopped communications for 7 days? He's got the answer right here. Oh, okay, I thought you were saying 6. So it's a lot of revenue for our country. So we need to solve that. You have a question, I take it?
Yeah, I just had a question when you're done with that.
Okay, I'm done with that.
Your hand's been up for about 10 minutes. You got to have lost feeling in your hand.
I thought, wow, Steely Dan.
All right. So the thing that really stuck with me is that I wasn't really happy about the government being involved in cyber discussion, with Sony, and I didn't raise my hand when you were talking about whether the government should be involved in that. But you made a statement that was very provocative, and I loved it, that the government's job is to defend us from external threats. And now it's not just coming in through force, it's coming in through cyber attacks. So my question is more around, how do we include citizens in the discussion about our giving away a little bit of privacy for that protection? In a more violent or direct threat approach, it's much easier to see when there's troops on the ground or police or others there. But in the cyber world, it's obviously behind the scenes and hidden. And so the feeling or some level of distrust with the government is that there's a certain level of that already occurring, yet citizens of the nation perhaps didn't have a say in the matter. Not that we wouldn't have said yes, just that it's pretty clear that there is a certain level of that. So what's your opinion on how we engage citizens in the decision to say, I'm going to give away a little bit of that privacy for the protection for the government to protect me against cyber attack?
Well, I think it has to be transparent to the extent it can be, and it can be. We can be almost completely transparent in this space. And the issue is, so what is it that we're going to have people share, and what's the role of the government, what's the role of industry, how do they work together, and what are the benefits? And then how does that help the American people, and then how does that help our allies? And I think, for example, the issue that people quickly jump to is they're reading our emails, listening to our phone calls. And that's factually inaccurate. And so when you get to that and you say, so this was the good part about having Jeff Stone come in. If a guy from the ACLU can come in and say, wow, you guys have the greatest integrity, you protect U.S. persons data better than anybody in government, you think, now why didn't that message get out? Why didn't that message get out? And I'll give you my thoughts on that. And that's because the way the media is today, it sensationalizes and inflames, and it doesn't fully inform. Because that story I gave you on Jeff Stone came out in December and January 2013, 2014. But almost every group I've talked to, nobody had ever heard that story. And you say, why is that? And the answer is, well, that doesn't make the news at CNN. Well, actually, the government is doing a good job. We missed this point a little bit, and we had these guys from the ACL come in and check them out. They spent 5 weeks going through everything they did, and guess what? They're doing exactly what we asked them to do, and they're doing it really well. And they're stopping terrorist attacks, and dang. And we think they ought to keep doing it. That didn't ever come out. Why? So if we were to fix one thing, and I don't mean to stump on this, but if we're going to fix something, we've got to give the American people the facts unemotionally without sensationalizing and inflaming it. I have 16 grandchildren. I don't want any of them to be the victim of a terrorist attack or any other kind of thing, just like you do for all your children. So how do we do this as a nation? We've got to solve these problems together. And I think, we do have a great country. It's better than any country in the world. We've got, with this current political process, it's terrible. When you're sitting there with your spouse or your wife, and I'm sitting there and you're embarrassed to watch some of these debates, you think, man, this is bad. We're in the wrong place. So how do we get to the right place? And it starts with each and every one of us. By stepping up and helping people understand the truth, all of the truth. And that's the part that I find frustrating. As members of Congress who stood up and said, they're listening to our phones. You see these guys holding them up at rallies? No, darn well that's not true. They should be held accountable for not being straightforward. Or what's that mean when you're not straightforward and you say something that's intentionally wrong? Oh, yeah, you got it. So we ought to have that part fixed. We need a country that works together. And we're in the wrong place, and I think we got to back up and go get that, and over the next few years, build that back. And in the meantime, in the cyber arena, this is a tech area. Let's go fix that. Because, you know, I have these grandchildren who have iPhones and iPads. They're the best at all these Mario Brothers. They kick my butt at this. They're just amazing. They won't even play with me. I'm not good enough. I used to be great. And they said, well, great ain't good anymore. Off to the side. You know, so, and it should be, really should be, and people should know that what the government is doing is actually doing what we've asked them to do. And, you know, I think, so when John talks about his son in the Marine Corps, and I think about serving 40 years in the military, somebody said, so why'd you serve so long? You heard my father-in-law's statement, because he couldn't get a job on the outside. But the actual reason was, you know, these men and women in the military and the intelligence community came in with one thought in their mind. How do we help our country? How do we do what our nation needs us to do? And they deserve our respect and admiration for what they're doing to protect us every day. And when one person makes a mistake, it's not against the other 7 million that are doing a great job, but we kind of rub it over all of them. We should understand there are going to be bad people in all this. Hold them accountable and drive on. You know, it was a privilege and honor to serve our nation and serve with these great young Americans and with our allies. And so that's my thoughts. And we have the technical ability to fix cyberspace. So we ought to go do it. So thank you very much. Thanks, folks. Honor and privilege.